Hello YouTube, good afternoon wherever you are, or good morning or good evening, whatever your time is. So today I'm going to talk about boundaries. Yes, you had me correct. I would like to dive into it a bit more. Let me put on my glasses, I cannot see. I welcome you, relax, get some tea, get drink, get biscuit, anything you can, get it, sit down, be comfortable, and let's start this discussion. Boundary is this thing spoken about a lot more now than before. You always hear boundaries, but not in the way that is discussed now about personal boundaries. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. As before I start, what are boundaries, right? People say boundaries. What are boundaries? When it comes to personal boundaries, what are those? That's what I'm going to talk about today. So just to give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about what are boundaries. I'm going to define what boundaries is, what a boundary look. I'm going to talk about why it's good to have boundaries, right? Why is that good? Who boundaries are even suited for. Everyone can have boundaries, but the kind of people that definitely need boundaries. So let's get, you're asking what are boundaries, especially when we talk about physical boundaries. Physical boundaries are easy to recognize, like this is my house, that my neighbor's house, this is my fence, other side of that fence belongs to someone else, right? So physical boundaries are things that we can recognize, things that we can see. For example, like I said, walls are boundaries, like this is my wall and the next side does not belong to me, right? Different floors, I live in a flat. The next flat I know belongs to someone else, right? Fences, if you live in a house or that whatever is in your fence belongs to you. That's why when you throw a ball and it goes to your neighbor's fence, you don't climb and go find it. You know, you call them, you check who's home and you ask them to give you your ball back. Well, that's what you're supposed to do. We recognize physical boundaries. So boundaries tells you what's yours, what belongs to you. It tells you where you end and someone else begins. It's as simple as that. So boundaries are also things that differentiate you from someone. What are the things that differentiate you from someone else? What characteristics differentiate you from someone else? Boundaries are things that we talk about quite a lot actually in other ways. For example, when we went to school, we talk about the skin. The skin is the largest organ in our body, and you know, at school we learned that that's our skin is a barrier. It's a form of a boundary that protects our internal organ from invasion. Like for example, the skin stops viruses getting in, bacteria getting in, etc, etc. That's what the skin does. And also it provides protection because it stops us from having internal injury, so that when you fall down, you know, your kidney is not burst. You know, your ribs are not broken. So our body is made up of boundaries. Also, for example, our eyes is another boundary. When I blink, you know, my eyelid is protecting my eyeball. Our whole body has boundaries because it's a form of protection. I'm going to talk more how we can apply those boundaries in terms of dealing with other people. How can we recognize emotional and spiritual boundaries? Emotional and spiritual boundaries are harder to recognize than what I've just described. The skin, you know, you can feel it. When you see your neighbor's fence, you can see it. But how do you recognize emotional and spiritual boundaries when it's not so obvious? Why also is it good to have boundaries? You know, why should we have boundaries? Why shouldn't we just live life easy? You know, it's easier maybe not having boundaries because then you don't have to deal with people. You don't have to communicate with people at all. People just do what they want and then you just respond the way you want, right? But boundaries, actually, I'm gonna say it's a good thing to have. By knowing what your boundaries are, it creates freedom. Actually, it creates freedom for you. You know what you can and cannot do, right? It's like when you steal and you get caught, you know that you could go to prison, so can then make that conscious decision whether to steal or not. So that's what boundaries are. When you know what your boundaries are, you are actually more relaxed about what you can and cannot do. So recognize, and also it makes it easier for other people to recognize your boundaries, right? For example, if you tell someone, for example, if you're coming to my house, you need to call me. They might turn up, but they know that you've already told them before that if they're coming to your house, they have to call you. So then they know next time if you don't pick up, next time if they want to come and actually make sure you're home to see you, they will make sure they will call and check with you first. So it makes easier other people dealing with you as well. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone, right, and you leave feeling so violated? It's like, I know they weren't shouting, I know they weren't screaming at me, but I just finished the conversation and I'm saying yes to so many things that I don't actually want to do. You know, so have you been in that conversation where you felt violated? Another thing also is that another reason why it's good to have boundaries is that it's good for the people involved. Like I said, the people that are dealing with it is good for them as well. They might not realize that now, that boundaries are also good for them. They might not realize it because, you know, if you tell someone you need to call me before you come to my house, some people don't want to do that, you know. So it's like, oh, like, why should I call you before I come to your house? It might sound crazy to you. Well, I hope it does, but to other people, it's a normal thing. Why should I call you? Why can I not just come when I feel like it? But it's also good for them because they don't waste their time coming all the way to see you and you're not home. You know, it's easier for them to pick up the phone, call you and make sure you're home before they get here. It saves their time also. They might not realize that, but in the long run, boundaries is good for both people that are involved. Right, so then boundaries also help us keep good things in and bad things out, right? So talking about the body again, the body is a very good example because we all have bodies. It's a very good example. The body allows good things in. For example, your mouth allows food in, and also your body allows toxic and waste out in the form of sweat and other ways that we let go of waste. Use your imagination. So when you have boundaries shouldn't be like a wall, right? Your emotional boundaries shouldn't be like a physical that you cannot move. I'll go more into that later. But boundaries are like doors. Remember my last video when the video is titled "You Are Like a House"? Go check it down. Actually, it's a good video. I advise that you check it out. So your boundaries should be like a key, again going back into that video. So you allow people in, you allow people out, and you open your door, you look and see if this person is okay to come in. What boundaries are supposed to be like. Just like your body, it allows good thing in like food and oxygen, and then it allows bad things out like waste and sweat, right? So that's what boundaries are supposed to be like. So boundaries has actually existed ever before I was born, you were. So let's go to creation. In the beginning, whether you're a Christian or a Muslim, this is the story of how it started. In the beginning, God created man, right? And then God imposed a boundary to his first creation. You know, he said, I've created you. You can have all these animals. You can eat all this food. You can have all this land, but I ask one thing of you and one thing alone. God actually commanded Adam. He commanded. He didn't ask. He didn't suggest. He made a commendation. He said, I command you to eat everything, freely eat everything, but do not eat from the tree of good and evil. He commanded Adam to not eat from the tree of good and evil. So when you're making a boundary, you're not suggesting, you're not implying, you are letting people know in a firm way that this is a no, right? I am giving this reason, I'm giving this example for two reasons, right? The first thing is to tell you that boundaries are okay. Boundaries has always existed. Whether you know it or not, boundaries has existed. Whether people consciously gave you boundaries or unconsciously told you what their boundary was, but there has some interaction you've been in, there has been some boundaries in it, right? For example, when you go to school, you have to come to school at a certain time. If you don't come to school, you get told off. You know, they ring your parents, etc., etc. So you've been in a situation where boundaries were imposed on you. You just weren't aware that those were actually boundaries. And the second reason why I gave the example of creation, that God commanded Adam to not eat from the tree, is because people will break those boundaries, right? So if Adam breaks the boundary, what do you think your neighbor is going to do if you're trying to create boundary with your neighbor? You guess it right, they're going to try and break it. So that's why I gave that example, right? Because Adam was sinless and he didn't obey God, right? He break those boundaries that God gave them. How can someone else, you know, you tell them one time, this is my boundary, and they're like, yes sir, yes ma, I respect it forevermore. You know, it's not going to be like that. So that's why I give that example. So that's the thing about boundaries, right? People will try and break those boundaries, but I'm not going to talk about what to do when people break your boundary. We're going to have another discussion in my next video, and then I'm going to say what to do when someone has break your boundary. So come again to my channel and check out that video. So I'll give an example what a boundary could be, because you're like, well Bella, you're saying all these things but I don't actually know what a boundary is or what someone is doing, right? It's easier to recognize when someone outright insult you, but when people are breaking certain boundaries, you don't know. So I'll give an example. So this example, I know everyone is in a relationship, right? You have that friend, or you know, not even if you have that friend, you hear things, right? So I'll give an example of a friend this friend is always complaining about their relationship. They're complaining about their boyfriend, how the boyfriend is abusive, verbally, physically, cheating, just everything, right? This boyfriend is doing. Or you can tailor it to other situation. It doesn't have to be this harsh. So this boyfriend, we'll call him Alex, right? So Alex does all these things, and then your friend, we'll call her Megan, comes all the time and is telling you what Alex is doing to her. You know, Alex does this, Alex does this. You've told your friend that, you know what, Alex is it's your choice. Alex shouldn't be hating you, okay? It's not right that Alex is doing this stuff to you. You've given your friend all the good advice that you can as a friend, but you gave them the choice to make the decision to leave or not, but you've told them that this is not an acceptable behavior. So your friend, every time you meet up with your friend, they're having this conversation with you what Alex is doing. You don't get to talk about anything else. You know, all you get is this same conversation about Alex. This has happened many times. You've now told your friend that, you know what I've told you many times, what Alex is doing is just not okay. I'm here for you if you want to take actual steps. I'm not going to tell you what those steps are. You're an adult, make those steps for yourself. But, you know, I'm not comfortable having this conversation because I'm just going to be telling you the same things. And quite frankly, the way Alex is treating you is actually making me upset. You know, so every time you have this conversation with your friend, you're actually left from the conversation drained, annoyed, pissed off, frustrated. You know, it's like, you know what they're supposed, what they should be doing to make this stop, but they're not doing it. So you're left feeling all this anger, you know, because you love your friend. You don't like the way Alex is treating your friend, right? So your friend leaves feeling, oh, okay, I've released, I'm all right now, go back to the abusive situation. And you're left still angry on the behalf of your friend, right? So this is not healthy for you. It's really not healthy for you. So they've ruined your whole day. You know, you go to bed even thinking about this Alex, what you would have done to the Alex if you were your friend. You know, you do this, you do that. You know how you think, right? So how can you impose a boundary in that situation? How you would impose a boundary in that situation would be like what I just said. You tell your friend that you're not okay listening to this conversation anymore. You can talk about other things. You can be like, you know what, how about we talk about your day? How about we talk about something else? And if they keep bringing the Alex conversation, you revert back to other topics, right? If they keep doing it, then you'd be like, you know what, so I've got somewhere to go actually, because they're not respecting your boundary clearly if you've communicated this to the person, right? I know you can be frustrating when these things happen. We all have burdens. That's part of living in this life. We have burdens, and sometimes we want to help other people. For example, the situation I gave with the friend, Alex and Megan. But life is a journey that each and everyone has to go through. We all have to go through our lives. You have to allow other people to go through their journey and their life. By taking on other people's burden, you are actually a thief. Yes, you are a thief. You're stealing this person's opportunity for growth and for them to experience this lesson and actually learn from it. So let's say my friend complain and I'm like, you know what, come, let's go. I'm taking you out of this place. You know, you've told me I'm gonna solve it now. I'm gonna beat up Alex. I'm gonna pack up your bags and we're leaving, right? That's not them dealing with that. They have to make that choice. So you can be a friend, advise them, and make certain suggestions within your limits, but you cannot physically remove your friend, right? They have to make that choice. So like I said, you might think that you're being kind by imposing on your friend, and later on, actually, some friends might hate you, right? Let's say you then do that and your friend don't end up finding someone. I'm not saying, you know, you can't find someone after an abusive relationship, but they'll blame you for ruining their relationship, right? Even though you were trying to do the right thing. Your act of kindness might not actually be kindness either. Secretly, you might think that, you know what, this person is not smart enough, this person is not able enough to clearly deal with the situation, so I'm going to jump in and help them. Or you can be like, you know, I'm tired of hearing this situation. To make you shut up, I'm actually going to do what you cannot do and do all these things, rip you from your relationship and stuff like that. For some people, all these struggles are necessary to wake them up out of the situation and push them for better. We must each carry our own load, carry our own burden in this world, right? I know you want to, I want to. Some situations are clear, especially the situation with Alex and Megan. If he's beating you up, get out, right? It's easy, but when emotions are involved, you can't make those decisions for someone. They have to wake up and make those decisions for themselves. Because let's say you do that, you rip them out of that relationship, they're probably going to meet the same person, that's Alex, but in a different body, right? That's going to treat them the same way. But once they wake up and realize, you know what, I'm too good for this, I'm too good to tolerate a man that's hitting me, that's doing all this thing, they physically take themselves out of that situation, then they know not to choose another Alex. This is just a small example. I hope you understand where I'm coming from. And then if you're a parent, I know when you're a parent, your children are not aware of how to deal with people yet. They don't know how to set boundaries and stuff like that. That's where you come in, right? Teach the child how to impose boundaries so that they can respect your boundaries, and also you can respect their boundary, right? For example, when a child is a baby, you teach them how to put on their socks. But then when they're 10 years old to 15 years old, you know, you're not going to be putting that socks anymore. That's your boundary. You're big enough now to put on your own socks and stuff like that. It's like taking your child to school when they're 5 years old, and then dragging your child to uni when they're 23. There are boundaries. But by teaching the child at a young age, then when they grow up, they know how to then impose certain boundaries that they know it's not okay. And then when I say child, I'm talking about an actual child, not a grown adult. Not a grown adult that's acting like a child. I'm talking about an actual child, right? In the UK, a child is from up till 18. In other countries, it's more. I think in the US, it's 21. Don't quote me on that. And also depends on, but what I'm saying is, it's around that age, 16, 18. For me, I think that's where you kind of a more mature young adult, right? So when I say child, I'm not talking about someone that's behaving as like a child. I'm talking about an actual child. So the question then that you might probably have, or someone else might be thinking, is how about people that are abused and neglected? Because I've just told you that by teaching your children about boundaries, they then they then grow up and impose those boundaries for themselves. But how about the people that did not have those skills? How about the people that were abused and neglected and didn't develop those skills, and they actually don't know how to respect boundaries? It's not like they're bad, they just were not taught how to respect those boundaries, right? So again, going back to the story about Alex and Megan, you can discuss this with the person. So let's say, again, Megan keeps telling you the story, etc. Even though you've communicated this to them, right? Megan, I'm not comfortable with you telling this situation. You can then signpost them. You can give them phone numbers. There is this domestic abuse line that you can call. Be resourceful, right? As long as want to heal. So let's say Megan then come to me, you know what, Bella, I'm ready now. I'm ready to leave Alex, but I can't because of financial reasons, because of this reasons, but I actually want to, right? So that's the key word there. That's the difference here. Now Megan actually want to leave Alex. It's just other reasons why they can't. So let's say Alex pays for the rent, or they share rent, you know, and Megan cannot easily leave. Then you can then come in and be like, you know what, there is a domestic abuse line that could help. They have shelter, or I could look online for places you could rent. But guess what? You're not doing the verb. What is a verb? A verb is a doing word. You're not actually doing the work. You're providing the resource. You're being resourceful to them, but they're then taking the steps. For example, when you do give them the contact details for the service, the shelter service for people that experience domestic, they're then gonna call and take that up, right? And also when you find them somewhere to rent, you've looked and you've given them the website. For example, go to Zoopla. It's a UK software for finding homes. You give them the website, they look for it. Or if they don't have access to laptop, you send them the link, but then it's their responsibility to call up, stuff like that. So you're being resourceful, you're not doing the work. And this is good thing as well, especially for someone that's going through domestic abuse. It gives them self-control, right? Sorry, it gives them sense of control and sense of self-determination. It's like, I took myself out of that situation. I did this for myself. It empowers them actually to keep pushing. And also, I would say that boundaries are actually even more useful to people that have experienced abuse, actually, because when you've experienced abuse, it's likely that distorts our perception of what is an acceptable and unacceptable behavior. If someone, for example, is physically abusive, they're hitting you, you know it's not right, but after a while you're like, well, they get drunk, that's what they do. You start to create excuses, right, that you think now that's acceptable because the person is drunk, but not knowing that under no circumstance is it acceptable for them to hit. You're kind of immune to it now. It's like in the beginning, if you was to witness someone getting getting shot up, for example, it's more traumatizing. But because there's so many movies about people getting shot, stabbed, etc., it's not as shocking anymore. Observe this: when you watch a film, you would literally not even close your eyes when you see stabbing, gruesome stabbing or killing, because you're used to viewing it. Maybe before you were like, oh my god, like it's traumatizing, but no, it's not. That's why so many people love horror movies now, right? So in most cases, if you were abused, your boundaries were walked all over, or they never existed, right? Especially if it was your parents that were abusive, your boundary never existed. So by thinking about your boundaries, not someone giving you these boundaries, you're actually thinking about it, right? I'll give I'll put out a video that tells you how to think about your boundaries. You can start to heal, self-healing. If you've looked at one of my other videos, I'm big on self-healing. You can then start to self-heal, and you can then advocate for yourself. So I will give an example of religion, right? Don't come for me. I just want to give something that's relatable. I've given the skin, now I'm giving religion, right? Why I'm giving religion is because over 5 billion people in the planet subscribe to a religion, right? Out of 7, a little bit over 7 billion, over 5 billion believe in a religion. And the biggest religions, the top 3 religions is Islam, Christianity is first, Islam, and then Hinduism, right? These are the top 3 religions. So imagine boundaries. So imagine if, so basically boundaries create clarity for everyone that's involved, for all that's involved. So now imagine how you would feel if you had a God who doesn't tell you what please or displease them. The one thing that all these religions have in common is the fact that they tell you clearly how to follow them, how God in that religion wants you to follow him. For example, how can you tell the difference between Hinduism and Christianity? When you see a Hindu person and a Christian person, first there's a physical difference, especially if they're practicing Hindus or Christians. Also, they have different books. For example, Christians have the Bible and Hindus have the Vedas, which tells them clearly which way for them to follow their God if they want to belong in that faith. So maybe in Hindu and Christianity, it's easy to see them apart, to separate them, right? To differentiate them, again, using the keyword earlier. But how about if we talk about a Christian and a Muslim? Again, the physical appearances is different based on how they dress, but the beliefs is a little bit similar, unless you've read the Bible and the Quran. Then you when you read the Bible and the Quran, the differences are very, very small, but physically, maybe if they're practicing, you can see the difference. The point I'm making is that religion gives their followers clear boundaries, clear indication of what they need to do to be in that faith. That's what boundary is. It tells other people that interact with you, this is what's acceptable, it's not what's acceptable. The only person that can take on someone else's burden, according to religion, is the Christian religion that talks about Christ dying on the cross for mankind. So you not setting boundaries and being the hero in everyone's story, you can't sustain that. Do you know why? Because only Christ can. I'm sorry to break this to you, my friend, but you're not Christ, okay? You will not be able to carry other people's burdens. People have to carry their own burdens. Like I said, by having boundaries, it don't just help you, it help other people know how to deal with you. You also know how to deal with other people. And my final point is that boundary gives you self-respect. You have self-respect, right? Because you're saying, I respect myself, and this is not what I would tolerate from someone else. And guess what? It also allows you to respect other people, because if you're having boundaries, you're saying, I won't tolerate you dealing with me this way. You then have to not deal with people the way that is rude or that's unacceptable according to your standard as well. So having boundaries is actually good for both people involved. Like I said, it is good for self-respect, for self-esteem, and also is good for mental clarity, because once you know what's acceptable for you, it's clear when someone abuses that. You're not thinking, did they actually mean to hurt me? Maybe they didn't know that this is hurtful to me, because you've clearly communicated that, and because you've known this in advance, that this is a boundary for you, you would know clearly when someone has breached that, right? When someone has, you're not left feeling violated but not knowing why. It also allows you to be able to communicate how you feel. And another good thing as well about having boundaries, it actually forces you to learn how to communicate with other people, because for people to know your boundaries, you need to tell them exactly what those boundaries are. In conclusion, it's good to have boundaries. Boundaries is good for you, it's good for others around you, it's good for your mental health, and it's good practice to respect that. So in our next discussion, because right now it's like, okay, Bella, you've told me what boundaries are, you've told me you've told me what people that boundaries are good for, you've told me why boundaries are good, you've given me example from God, from the Bible, about how God created boundaries in the beginning. But Bella, how do I recognize what are my boundaries? Because it's not easy to know what your boundaries are. How do I recognize that? That's probably a question that you have, which I'll answer in a subsequent video that's gonna come out. You will then want to know how to set emotional and spiritual boundaries. So once you've recognized what your boundaries are, how do you then actually create those boundaries, set those boundaries? And then another thing you might want to know as well is, what do you do when those boundaries you've created are broken? What can you do? So all these questions I would give an answer to in my next video. Like I said, Adam and Eve break the boundary that God created. So people are going to test your boundaries. People are going to break your boundaries. But what can you do to enforce those boundaries? So come back to my channel and we'll discuss that in part 2. All right, then. Thank you so much. Peace. Bye.